else.
You carry on, please.
One of the interesting things in one of those photographs is in the corner you see the reflection of the liquor store and some other stores. So I'm thinking though of some of the, what is at this point I think just a document of, but some of the possibilities that exist in the way in which you photograph these things that bring very different things to bear on these photos. So that was just a comment because I noticed that. I thought, I know that street, I mean, I know where that place is.
The main building.
Yeah. So, and I know that those reflections. So that was. Were you about to say something else?
No.
Do you know the work of Reggie Wilson?
No.
Reggie Wilson is a choreographer based in Brooklyn. Has a company called Fist and Heel. And one of the things that Reggie and Fist and Heel do is they really are looking at shouts and hollers and the entire history of really the fist and the heel hitting the ground. And one of his wonderful signature pieces is really a story of himself as a modern choreographer, so trained in utterly modern dance, but talking about a kind of history of Africa. He calls it, I think, post-African hoodoo or something. Reggie has a funny title for it. But it is a piece that actually walks through in movement an entire history of a diasporic African-American experience. Reggie's doing a retrospective in New York City in the spring, in March, at DTW, which is now called Live Art. You may want to check that out because it's in a very different frame, but some of the things that interest you in terms of movement. But that sort of brings me to the objects and things that you're working with are about labor and the deep impress of things that formed kind of grooves of labor, the gumboot in the mines, the the cotton and the picking of cottons and the tying of the bale in the hands, and then even if one might say the barber shop, right, which is another kind of activity. And there is something, and then I look at your work, some of those sort of larger pieces, where there's obviously a very detailed and carefully crafted labor on the part of you as the artist. And I wonder whether there might not be something interesting in bringing that labor into the space of your work. That is, the gumboot placed on its own has a kind of absence to it. Then I see it on the video and then it comes alive. But the gumboot, as even if I was, walking the gumboot, hearing this, there are so many other sensory things, but even more importantly, the sheer task of making. And one of the places that you yourself sought to sort of step out of the gallery is doing those art projects with kids, and then people take that on. But it's both thinking perhaps of unusual sites, but sites of a different kind of labor, because I'm trying to think, the gumboot in the mines, what is the equivalent of the gumboot on 125th Street? What is today's gumboot, right? Or what is it's not today's gumboot, what is the gumboot? Because gumboot hasn't lost its significance in the mines. But what is the 125th Street's gumboot? And maybe it is but I think of the braiders and the braiders that are African braiders, and those and those shops are open till 9, 10, and 11. The nail shops. I mean, so there's a whole world of various forms of labor. The Jamaican and women from the Caribbean and their sensible shoes, they're all coming back. They're all LPNs. They're all home health care workers, the nanny. I mean, there are just many other places where these things, and it might be interesting to know what that does. So that's another sort of side. And then quickly, by way of reference, do you know Sadiya Hartman? S-A-D-I-Y-A Hartman, H-A-R-T-M-A-N. Sadiya, I'm going to refer you to both of her books. Okay. So she's I think she's still a professor at Columbia. But one of her second book, I think, is a very interesting sort of personal narrative of her as an African-American woman finding her connections with Africa. But it's told in a somewhat poetic manner. But her first book is very much on violence and race, and there may be something very interesting there for you to check. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. evidence versus documentation. If you could bring just one little corner of something, it would enrich our experience of it possibly a lot, and just something to play with.
I'm not sure I'm understanding. Can you say a little bit more about evidence versus documentation?
Well, the documentation is what we see on the screen here.
Absolutely.
It's descriptive. It tries to, in a way, nail down the artwork, and evidence is something that is a residue, a trace, something that is much more open for me also to draw conclusions. But it's also much more open, sensory, perceptual. I can do something with it. Just as an idea, not.
I mean, I'd like to explore that, and I'm not sure that I'm getting this right in this moment, but if you'd like to talk to me about that further,
we can talk.
I greatly appreciate that.
I'll need to squeeze it into the last minute here.
It sounds very interesting, and I'd like to talk to you about it.
I mean, just to follow Klaus's point, I think we started to discuss some of that when we were in New York, that all the time we're looking at the screen, and that things that are mediated by the camera, and sometimes we need an encounter with the actual objects. So if I'm imagining what it feels like to sit on those objects, and my understanding of them.
Okay.
So it's to do with the fact you've had to travel.
It's popped up with the paper, me being from Central Europe and having different kind of packing paper, and I had this longing for actually touching it, getting an understanding.
I understand.
I was very moved by it, but I would connect in a different way.
Certainly.
And really just an idea.
Okay. Now I understand. I mean, I think the winter residence I had evidence. I brought the small sculptures and passed it around. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're forced to look at things that aren't the actual art objects always.
Okay.
In the context of a presentation.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
The work in the exhibition, and that's the encounter.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps you could have some seats that we could sit on.
I mean, I would love to do that. I don't want to pay for transportation
Yeah.
and shipping.